Oh my goodness. Welcome back to Scotch and a Beer with Officer Dan. Don't know what episode this is, but it's getting up there. This next gaggle of videos is going to encompass everything that went around me doing Formula Drift. The befores, the afters, the drama, the fun, everything that happened in between, and pretty much the reasons why I'm not still doing Formula D to this day. Again, I've been putting off this episode, so it's time to bite the bullet and actually pump this sucker out. Now, I've been stressing about this video as every story has 2, maybe even 3 or 4 sides to it. I reached out to a bunch of these guys via electronic mail and didn't get any kind of response. So I'm going to only be portraying my side of things that may or may not conflict with other people's side of things. By all means, if they want to put a video out and explain everything, I'd be happy to link it in the description of this video. But before I get into my shit show, it's Scotch and a Beer time. So, No Coast just happened last month, and the kind folks over from the East Coast, aka Blinky, aka Kevin White, brought some Yinglings, and Dwayne Ramsey was nice enough to give me one of his so that I could use it on this show. So thanks guys for that. Crack that open in a second. And some other fine folks from Texas brought me this bourbon. And I asked them to put a sticky note with their name on it so I could remember it during Scotch and a Beer, because of course I didn't, and I suck. But thank you. This is the Balcones Texas Pot Still Bourbon, straight bourbon whiskey from Tejas. Ooh, that's so much stronger than Scotch already. I am drinking this on the rocks because whilst I do love single malts and Scotch, I am a girl when it comes to drinking bourbons. So I like my water with a little bit of whiskey involved. Kind of reminds me of dirt, and like when you open like a pool toy that you have to blow up, that smell is very apparent. So I guess it kind of reminds me of pool. Wow. That's actually a very smooth bourbon. It doesn't burn going down. It doesn't burn sitting in your mouth. Holy smokes, Texas, you done did it. And it does say it is a soft finish for an approachable yet memorable bourbon. Touche. I actually like a bourbon for once. Thank you, Texas. You guys are great. And the East Coast Coors Light. That's a Yuengling, all right. Guess the oldest beer brewery in the United States. Anywho, moving right along. Now, I do want to preface this video with this statement. Luigi, Keith, and Aoki basically killed themselves for 3 solid months to try to get this car ready for Formula D competition. There were tons of delays with sponsored parts coming in. We were on a shoestring budget as it is, so that was a huge factor in things being late because I couldn't afford to get them. Plus, all 3 of these dudes basically had full-time jobs and companies to run on top of helping me out with all of this stuff. So, for that, I am eternally grateful for them, because without their help, I would have never even gotten to Long Beach in the first place. So, there's that. And they did this for free. I understand that a lot of teams that are starting out kind of have to do it this way, where you got to get some people to rally behind you, you become successful, and then you all share the rewards. And that was kind of how my thought process went. I just never vocalized that. So that goes into what I'm going to be talking about here in just a few. But huge thanks from the bottom of my heart to those guys, because I could not have done this without them. Hands down, no freaking way. It's really difficult for a grassroots team such as ours to jump into the pro ranks and hit the ground running unless you have a gigantic budget and guys that have actually already done Formula Drift competition like the crew. It's almost impossible to do well if you don't have two of those things, if not at least one of those things, especially the money. My 401k was very finite. There was X amount of dollars for the car build, there was X amount of dollars for the pre-registration for the events, there was X amount of dollars for the hard cards, and then there was X amount of dollars for travel expenses, hotel, meals, etc., etc., etc. So my 401k, the moment that I took it out, was basically already spent and gone in a flash. That being said, there was... Bless you. That being said, there was basically no way I was going to be able to pay these guys for their time and efforts that they put into this car. So apologies for that. I really wish I could have. It just wasn't in the cards for me at that moment in my life. Now, my hopes, dreams, and technically my safety cutoff point was to attempt 2 seasons at Formula D competition. If by the end of the second season, I didn't have some sort of money sponsor to help things along the way, I was just going to call it quits, cut my losses, and hey, that was a good time. So that was my end goal. If we did pick up a money sponsor, I would have hoped it would be with the same team, the same guys, and we'd kind of grow together into an actual formidable team doing Formula Drift. Now again, this was part of my internal dialogue, and don't know what that was. And I never appropriately expressed this to the rest of the team. So this was just something that I was thinking in my head, like, hey, let's do this to the point where we can actually make money at it. But I don't think I ever said that out loud. I guess I kind of felt the same way that I did when I was on Danny George's team. We'd nurtured a pretty damn solid team together, and they all had the same kind of expectations. Let's put in this hard work, let's do it for free, but eventually if Danny could ever make it, he might be able to pay us money, etc., etc., etc. But again, that was never verbalized to me. I just kind of felt that that's the way that it was going to be if we were to continue going on to that team. But again, I kind of just assumed that people felt that way also. I was wrong. Therefore, I failed as the team leader to vocalize my goals, my ideals, basically anything that I wanted to do in the future past what we were doing right now. Just failed miserably at actually communicating that to everybody. And it bit me in the ass hard. This is the story of 50% of my team quitting after round 1 of Formula Drift competition. Now, I'm a decently easygoing person. Most of the people that have met me in real life would kind of vouch for that. I'm not super uptight. I can get stressed out, but everybody does. It's human nature. I'm also not super outwardly competitive like Matt Field. Super competitive, and you know he's super competitive. That's just how some people are. I'm not that way. I hold all of that inside. Deep down, I always want to strive to be the absolute best at something that I'm doing. So it's super hurtful when things don't actually go that way. I just kind of cover it up and laugh about it. That's just the defense mechanism that I've set up with myself. So what I'm saying is it hurts when I fail, and I fail a lot. So this particular event hit me super hard. And I'd like to say that building a team is like building the foundation for your entire pro drift career. Well, I caused my foundation to crumble to the size of a toothpick, and then it was basically the snowball effect, but that snowball was made of shit and tied to my leg and just dragged me down the mountain with it. And that was 100% caused by moi. Step 1 in my progress towards failure. The RB25DET engine. I loved the RB. I'd had the RB for 2 years previous to this. It was under 400 horsepower, and that thing just ran and ran and ran. And like a lot of other people say, all I did was change the oil. And that's literally all I did. I changed the oil on the RB, so I figured, hey, this thing's been pretty solid for me. Despite what everybody is saying, I'm going to go ahead and campaign this sucker in Formula Drift competition. There's a pretty good reason as to why there aren't any in FD competition. Actually, it's a plethora of reasons that I will go into in great detail over all of these next episodes. Man, that's good. That being said, I will preach to this day that running the RB under 400 horsepower and you can just have that thing for the rest of your life. It's not going to blow up and you're going to be a happy dude. The moment you cross that 400 horsepower barrier, you have to start throwing your wallet at it. And I mean throwing your wallet at it hard. Once you cross the 700 horsepower barrier, you might as well just dump your whole savings account into that sucker and sell everything you own to keep it going, because that's just how they are. Now, I did just that. I threw a ton of money at the RB right from the get-go to overcome all of its shortcomings, which there are a ton of, right off the bat. And I was over 20K in just the motor alone to try to make it reliable for competition. And most of that's because the internet said so. I'd never built a motor like this. I've never even seen an RB that went over 500 horsepower in real life, so I didn't know. I had to rely on the internet, and sometimes that's not such a good idea. Even at 50% off for a lot of these parts, the pricing on RB stuff is also ridiculous. Nitto oil pump, $1,200. Ross Tough Bond harmonic balancer, $1,100. BC stroker kit, 2.8 liter, $5,800 US. Solid lifter conversion was $1,400 with dual valve springs, titanium stuff, and all that whole wad of junk. I ended up spending around $1,900 in just cams, and I'll get into that later. The intake and exhaust manifolds at 50% off were still almost $3,000. The crank snout being upgraded was $500 US. Another $1,000 on big injectors, $800 on an oil pan, $6,000 on a transmission from PPG, cam gears, HKS head gasket, Greddy timing belt, N1 water pump, ARP all around. We literally did everything we possibly could to get this thing reliable and dialed. I spent some bucks on this thing, and it really hurt the soul. I'll explain in great detail as this series goes on what failed and what didn't on the RB, what took us out of a round, what didn't take us out of a round, what saved our bacon, as we go on. And I think you'll be kind of surprised to see which parts actually broke, which was mostly all of them. So that's step one of my eventual downfall in Formula Drift competition. Right from the get-go, picked the wrong damn motor to start with. Lesson learned, should have went JZ or LS, like everybody else does, for a damn good reason. Add to the fact that we didn't even get the motor back, which was the stroker motor, from the machine shop before Long Beach, so we had to stick a stock bottom end in that thing with this crazy built head and this crazy big turbo in the hopes that it would last one round. So that was also weighing heavily on us. Which kind of plays into step two of my failure, not being able to test thoroughly before we went to professional competition. During the build, I didn't want to push the guys any harder than they already did. They possessed a skill set that I did not have, aka fabrication, wiring, mechanical stuff. Like, I can bolt on parts, but I don't know the intricacies of everything that goes into everything else. So I was heavily reliant on everybody else to kind of get that done, and I felt horrible pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, because I know these guys were literally getting off work, coming over to help on the car, and I just felt like such a dick for being like, yo guys, we're leaving soon. I don't know why that just happened. Spotify just randomly decided to kick on. That's cool. I did want to push the dudes to hurry up and get this finished, and that kind of came around to bite me in the ass too, because we literally finished the car the day we were leaving for Long Beach. We got one set of tires worth of testing on the track the day before. We had steering issues, and we're like, well, we're just gonna have to deal with this at Long Beach because we don't have time to fix it. We have to get this thing in, put all of the body panels on, put the wrap on, and that took us all night long until the next morning when we were supposed to leave to get done. So we went to Long Beach with an untested car. Lesson learned. Should have skipped round one and just cut our losses and did much better at round two in Atlanta. We would have had a dialed car that actually worked, and things would have been much better. And in hindsight, I wish we would have skipped Long Beach altogether, just because of the drama that you were about to hear unfold. Step three of my failure, my own attitude as a human being. This is also where things start to get tricky story-wise, and why I didn't want to do this video in the first place. I was riding the high of getting my Formula Drift license. I had a tire sponsor. I had most of a car done at this point, and I was quickly living the dream of becoming a professional driver in real life. The stoke was real. And it would seem that I took myself a little bit too seriously in regards to that with some of the things that would come out of my mouth later on during the weekend of Long Beach. It was my first time doing anything like this. I'd never been a professional at anything in my life. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how I would react. I didn't know how that would change me. I didn't know what my attitude would be. It just went into it going like I always do, just whatever happens, happens. So everything was super rad on the way to LBC. Spirits were high. We were super pumped on everything that was about to happen. We were borrowing Jim Guthrie's big rig. We had this huge hotel on wheels plus a stacker trailer. We were looking like we were ballers showing up to Long Beach. Everybody was pumped at this point. So to me, all I needed to get done in Long Beach was A, get through tech, B, not crash the car, and C, get over my nerves and or fears of being on the line at Long Beach with all the cameras and the fans and the other drivers and J-Rod and everything happening at once. I didn't know how I was going to react to that. So I wanted to get that over with so I could get that past me and move on to the next rounds, because I know that would have a huge impact on how I did at round one. So had we done all three of those things in this weekend, I would have considered that a victory. But like I said, I didn't communicate to the team, so that was a breakdown of communication on my part. Now, before the event even started, we'd gotten there early, we had tech the next day, so we were setting everything up, and we had gone over to a sponsor that Keith had gotten me for the car, which was Metal Militia. They gave us a bunch of free shirts and shorts and stuff. They gave us an easy up and a van to work with, which was really cool of them. Metal Militia isn't something that I would have ever wanted on the car, but Keith was super stoked to have it, and I thought, hey, maybe they can get us some exposure, so I went along with it. And on the car it went, and we got some free clothing out of it, and a van and an easy up, so super stoked about all of that. Now, Keith and I got into an argument about something before we'd even finished getting set up, and I think the words that came out of my mouth were, well, we wouldn't even have these guys as a sponsor if it weren't for me. Which, looking back on, was a pretty dick thing to say, because he's the one that got that sponsor on in the first place, even though it didn't do anything for me. They never posted anything, but that's besides the point. He got us free clothing, he got us an easy up, he got us a van to use for that whole weekend when all we had was basically this big rig. So huge thanks to them for even doing any of that stuff, and that was all him. And for me to say that, that was a really dick move. So straight off the bat, before we'd even started the event, I'd already pissed somebody off from the words that came out of my mouth. Nothing like getting a holier-than-thou cool guy attitude before you've even done anything in Formula D. All we did was show up, and I was already that guy. Lesson learned, don't bite the hand that feeds. AKA, don't shit on the people that have been helping you for free this whole time when you get to the actual event for the first time. Don't do that. And I've alluded to this a bunch of times, but step 4 of my failure as a human was to not communicate properly. I never once explained what I wanted or needed out of the people at the event itself. I kind of just expected them to see what the other teams were doing and just act as if they already knew. They'd never been to Formula D. This was really unfair of me to just kind of throw this on them and not lay down any kind of expectations or what I needed out of them, because I'd been there before, so I kind of had an idea. They hadn't. And so that was 100% on me not to lay down those expectations first. So instead, when things would go wrong or when they wouldn't go the correct direction, I would just get mad and hold it in. And that's the bad part. You cannot be mad at somebody for something you didn't tell them to do. Lesson learned, communicate, communicate, communicate. Even if it sucks, even if it's painful, get that shit out there. And that's a two-way street, because it was me holding all my stuff in and them holding all their stuff in, and it ended up not going very well. So we roll up to tech, we don't pass. Now, we didn't pass for two separate things. Drive shaft hoop was incorrect. Basically, we'd left the stock carrier bearing thing, hoping that that would be what passed us through tech. And my subframe height was too high, so we used solid subframe bushings that didn't quite have enough. I think it was like 1/32 or something that we were off, basically a washer thickness, and we needed to change both of those things and re-tech. Now, we didn't have a drive shaft hoop, so we had to drive to a speed shop, get a drive shaft hoop, get back, install it, and we had like 15 minutes left to hit tech, or we wouldn't have been able to drive at all. So thanks to the Metal Militia van, again, dick move on my part for belittling Keith about that, we were able to get that drive shaft hoop and get back and install it and go back to tech, and we actually passed. So now we're in for Formula D competition. Sick. Now, these are things that should have been fixed before we'd even left in the first place, because there's a rule book that's very specific about everything, and the crew chief's job is to make sure that the car is up to spec from the rule book. So these shouldn't have been issues, but they were, and that kind of silently pissed me off, but I didn't say anything because I wanted to keep everything rolling. Again, going back to the first lesson, practice and have the car ready beforehand so you are 100% dialed and ready to go before you get to the event. Now, certain dudes get to do media day on Thursdays. So for them, it's like extra practice because there isn't a paid practice on Thursdays for regular guys like me and or rookies and or anybody that's not one of the top 8 dudes in FD. So they get extra practice, and we went into the stands to watch. We got stoked out on everything. We went to dinner. Everything was seeming good. And then that's when things took a turn for the worst again. Now, to me, a big part of doing Formula D is everything that goes on outside of Formula D. The networking, when all the sponsors are at the bar, they're a little bit loose, you're talking to them, you work some deals in, cool, sick. It's a great place to get monetary sponsorship, part sponsorship, schmooze with other drivers, and you do this at every round across the country, all over these cities, and it's just kind of a really integral part of doing Formula D. And everybody brings their teams out, and everybody's just kind of having a good time because it's kind of a traveling circus. It's great. I did that with Danny George's team, and it was absolutely fantastic. So that's what I kind of expected we would do as my team. Now, at dinner, I had tried to explain this to the guys, and they said, no, that's a horrible idea. We need to go back to the hotel and plan and do all of this other stuff. And I was just like, well, that's kind of a Debbie Downer way to think about things. They're like, well, you're a professional, you should be acting like a professional. And we kind of ended it on that very sour note, and Jesse and I ditched them. I got them a hotel room right by the track, and we went out and hung out with the FD drivers and the teams and schmoozed and did what we needed to do. We ended up at the Pike. I had a little too much to drink, and I ended up going back to Matt Field's hotel in the back of his pickup truck, and I slept on his floor the night before my first competition in professional drifting avenue ever. So that was pretty sick. And I'm not even sure where Jay would ended up. I don't have any idea, because I got a little too drunk that evening, and Jay Wood kind of meandered off, I think, and did his own thing, which is fine with me. It's kind of how it's supposed to go. So Matt's hotel was luckily really close to where Long Beach was. So I woke up super early from being on the floor and uncomfortable and really, really cold. I just remember being like, man, this is the coldest I think I've ever been. I got up early and I headed down to the pits at Long Beach, and Jay Wood was out there already doing time lapses. He was like, dude, I can't sleep. I was so excited. And I was like, sick. Good call. Me too. And so we were just out there kind of together. He was getting some cool shots and setting up for everything for the day. And I had a driver's meeting in like an hour. Went and talked to Paul a little bit, the Hankook booth, like, how are we supposed to get tires and wheels over this bridge? And he was like, well, you just got to get them over here somehow. And I was like, cool, have them there as soon as possible. So we wheeled all these tires up over this bridge and brought them over to the Hankook booth. They put them all on, dialed. We're right in time for the driver's meeting. And I don't think they were allowing media in at this point. The year before they did, this year they couldn't. So it was just me by myself. And they did a driver's meeting for just the rookies, before they did the drivers meeting for everybody else. And in the rookies drivers meeting, they explain what not to do, how stupid people do stupid things and get in big trouble, and respect the rules, and this is what we expect of you as rookies, and so on and so forth. So their communication was great about what they expected from us, so we knew exactly what to do and what not to do. I should have taken that as a lesson and did that with my team, but I absolutely did not. So we roll right into the normal drivers meeting. Now everybody's starting to pile in. They moved all of us to the back, and we're just kind of sitting here, and it's starting to sink in at this moment as we're going through the drivers meeting for Long Beach, when the judges are like, we want you here, here, here. This is an acceleration zone. This is braking zone. It started to settle in that this was really happening. And now all these other drivers that I've been looking up to this whole time, I am now peers with and on the same competition course as. So that was a pretty defining moment for me in Long Beach, and very humbling. And I was just like, wow, things just got real. They would get real sooner, but they were real then. And I was just like, wow, this is actually happening. Can't believe this. So get out of the driver's meeting. I go talk to Paul again, get my tires. We bring them back over. Still haven't heard from anybody on the team. They all had schedules at this point. Everybody knew what time stuff was supposed to be. Everybody was kind of on board with that. We posted a thing of the schedules. Everybody took a picture of it with their phones. And that was kind of that. I just expected people to adhere to that, because it's a little different than the events that I run or Pro-Am events where things are kind of lax on the schedule. And I was like, the only thing I think I said to them was, guys, the schedule at Formula D is absolute. You miss stuff, you miss stuff. And that's it.